Chaz Marlar from Pair of Dice Paradise, self-proclaimed online board game personality. Oh, I enjoy games in many different shapes, sizes, and genres. But admittedly, there's a whole area of gaming that I've never really paid much attention to. Organized sports. And why not? I mean, they're games, right? But even so, I've never really been that much of a sports fan. I still don't understand exactly how basketball works. I tried golf once, but it quickly just degraded into driving the little cart around for 2 hours. And I plan my trips to Costco so they coincide with my college town's home football games, just so I can get a good parking spot. So, on the rare occasion when there's a news story to report on in which the world of sports and board games collide, I'm in over my head. And that's when it's time to call in some backup. And that's why I'm glad to be joined via internet today by Marty Connell, board gamer, sports enthusiast, and 16/8 of 830 seconds of the Rolling Dice and Taking Names board game podcast. Today, we are going to discuss the clout and influence that professional sports may be having on board games, and why it seems that sports-themed board games struggle in the marketplace. So, without further ado, let's welcome Marty Connell to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Marty.
Well, let me just tell you, I am extremely honored to be here, and I am very impressed. Your green room is stocked very well for your guests. I mean, I walk in, and you have sweet tea, and you have moon pies. So that is pretty awesome.
So Marty, you're one of the few board game enthusiasts that I know that also enjoys sports. And I've seen your tweets recently, with all of your being decked out in the Seattle Seahawks fan gear and everything. So I can tell you're really into them. So, what's it like being someone who is a sports aficionado, but also a board game aficionado?
Well, first, no, I am not a Seahawks fan, and we can attribute that little shenanigans to Miss Suzanne Sheldon, who does her little spot on Board Game Breakfast, because she's from Seattle and she did that stuff, and that's because they were playing our team. But what was your question?
Oh, I just wanted to make fun of you about that a little bit. There was no question at that point.
Because I am here for your amusement.
A few episodes ago on your Rolling Dice and Taking Names podcast, you and Tony were talking about a baseball, a board game that was based on baseball.
Bottom of the ninth.
Bottom of the ninth. Okay. And have you guys had a chance to play that one?
So Tony got to play this game at BGG Con. This is not in development yet. It's going to be going to Kickstarter, and it's going to be published by Dice Hate Me Games. Mm-hmm. And he got to play a prototype of it, and the whole goal is it simulates the bottom of the ninth in a baseball game, and it's done by using dice. So I didn't get to play, but he did, and he really enjoyed it.
And you guys also have a history, way back in the day. I believe you guys used to collect sports cards and stuff like that as well. So you followed, you're a fan.
Well, yeah. I mean, so I've played ball all my life. Mm-hmm. Both Tony and I did. Tony was probably even more of an athlete than I was. He played high school baseball. And he and I actually played softball together for about 15 to 20 years out of college. So not only do we watch it, we also play sports too.
How does the quality level of sports games compare overall to the quality level of just other games? Is there a difference?
Okay, let's say this is the quality of sports games. This is the quality of other games. I don't know if I'm out of frame yet, but it's up here somewhere. There is a real need for some good, solid sports board games. And people have tried to simulate different sports things, and for some reason, it just hasn't worked very well. I haven't played a lot of different sports games because there's just not that many out on the market. Sometimes you'll maybe have a board game that's based on some sort of sport, and they try to make a game out of it, and it works okay. And then others try to actually really simulate a sports game, a ball game, but they're very few and far between. So he and I have both been jonesing for somebody to come out with a really good, accurate sports game, and that's what we're kind of excited about this bottom of the ninth, because it kind of simulates the bottom of the ninth in a baseball game, and the pressure of like you're behind by one run or several runs like that, and you're facing a pitcher and trying to win. So yeah, the quality of sports game is just not that good right now.
Well, what do you think causes that disparity that you were talking about?
I think it's hard, personally, I think it's hard to simulate a a sports ball. It's hard to simulate a sports game in a board game, in my opinion, because I think for those that have tried, it ends up just kind of being boring. And maybe there's not a lot of attention there. I mean, there is things like, Games Workshop has the game Blood Bowl, which came out decades ago. And a lot of people really enjoy that because it simulates football and rugby, but you have the fantasy teams and the nice managers and stuff. So that's probably one of the more popular ones because I've heard people with that like doing leagues, fantasy leagues, like you have fantasy baseball leagues, doing leagues with this. So that's probably one that comes close to mimicking it. I just think it's tough to take and then some of them, how would you do like a basketball game? I'm not sure how you would simulate somebody shooting baskets, or it's just, to me, it seems like sports doesn't really lend itself very well to a board game. And I'm hoping somebody can prove me wrong.
Yes, it would be nice to expand, into that genre the right way, so it's really engaging and really well done. It does seem like a really tricky thing to pull off, though.
Or it could be, like you said, I'm one of the few board game hobbyists who enjoy sports, so maybe there's just not a lot of demand for board games about sports.
Well, that's a really good point. And what I'm wondering is, do you think that if someone was to pull it off, bottom of the ninth or some other game comes along that's sports themed, that really hits it out of the park, thank you, and it was a really big success, do you think that having a really successful, engaging, sports-themed game would actually help bring more people that wouldn't normally be into the board game hobby into it?
Oh, yes. From that perspective, I totally think that it would. I think having a board game based on sports would definitely help pull others who aren't into board games into it. And here's what I mean by that. So for a few decades now, fantasy sports has been really popular, like fantasy baseball and fantasy football. At one time, that was considered a very geeky thing, like how some people view board games, but what happens over time is that it got more accepted, and then that the jocks of the world, why am I using air quotes? I'm sorry. The jocks of the world, started to get into the fantasy sports and kind of saw, okay, this is really kind of cool. And there's always this joke that happens every year where fantasy football is really just D&D for jocks, which it kind of is. So I think if there was some sort of really well done board game where other people who aren't into sports may see it as a simulation of what they already like to play and watch, I definitely think it would help.
That's a really good point, and it actually reminds me of the big news story right now that the Green Bay Packers have been playing Settlers of Catan. And it makes me think that here's a group of people that this is probably the first modern board game that they have played and been introduced to. I would assume. And they're enjoying one that is known as a gateway game being a game that's used oftentimes to bring people in and introduce them to the hobby. So one of my questions I was going to ask you that you've already halfway answered was, if with Green Bay playing Catan, do you think that there's a possibility that other people will see them playing this, and that will help introduce board gaming to more people through them, and will help reduce some of the geeky stigma that might be associated with the hobby?
Well, I would like to make one correction in that the big story right now is actually Tom Brady's deflated balls. But right before that, the story was about the Packers playing Settlers of Catan. Or, my bad, it is now just called Catan. Thank you, Mayfair Games, yes. And so it leaked out. They said that one of the offensive linemen who played the games got on the radio station and kind of leaked out the news that they were playing this, and people were like, what are you talking about? And then it was picked up and it was like a Wall Street Journal story. And they said in the news article that the local game store in Green Bay, that people were walking in going, what is this game that they're talking about? And it got a lot of popularity because Packers fans are insane. I mean, what else are you going to do in Green Bay except pull for a football game, and if you're not sitting outside at Lambeau Field, you're inside doing something else, and you might want to now play a game. Like these guys actually said, it's so cold here, we need to find something to do indoors, and that's what they got into. And the owner of the store in Green Bay said that it got really popular. He sold all the board games off the shelf. Catan reordered some for Christmas and still sold out of those. So I think that's a prime example of like somebody who may have never heard of it, who is really big into their team and find out, wait a minute, they like that? Then I kind of want to know what it's about too. So I thought it was a great story. A lot of people were kind of poo-pooing on the idea, which really kind of bothered me. Like some big names were saying, like Will Wheaton was one. It's like, I don't know anything about this sports ball thing, but I heard that one of the teams likes this game, so I'm going to like them. And there's this weird stigma of like, you know, if I play board games, I don't like sports sort of deal. And it's like, just embrace it.
So let's say that the Packers continues playing Catan and that it does become a gateway game for them. What game do you imagine Green Bay moving on to next?
Mice and Mystics? Cheeseheads? This is awful.
When it comes to sports, athletics, board games, and everything, what's your final thought to tie it all together?
So here's the thing. I think sometimes that board gamers kind of look down at sports and people who like sports. I've just kind of seen it in general that when it comes up in topics like, oh, I don't care anything about sports, that's boring and stuff. And I just think we kind of need to be careful because a lot of people may look at what we do in the hobby and think, that's stupid, that's geeky, that's nerdy, I don't want to do that. And we don't want to give that same kind of elitist impression on things that other people may like. So if somebody is, you know, say I like sports or whatever like that, but I'm kind of interested in a board game, try to bring them in. And granted, there may not be a really good board game about sports that they might be able to get into, but just don't have the kind of elitist attitude of like, sports, you know, that's boring, I don't want to do that, anything like that, because the people who have other interests may think the same thing about us. That's just not a good thing. We want to be a nice, fun, friendly, inclusive group.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join me, Marty.
Thanks so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed chit-chatting with you about the sports ball and board games. And if anybody wants to find out more about us, you can go find our show, Rolling Dice and Taking Names, at our website at rolldicetakenames.com. You can find us on Twitter at Dice and Names. We have a pretty active guild on the Board Game Geek. You can also subscribe to our show on Stitcher or in iTunes. And we also have a small little YouTube channel that's not as successful as Chaz, but hey, we'll never be as successful as what he is. And that's at also Roll Dice Take Names.
Well, thanks for taking the time to join me and talk to me today about all of this stuff. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope to be able to do something else with you again really soon. Until then, I'll talk to you soon. He's already lost his connection again. He's gone. He's been gone for quite a while. Okay. Joining me now is Marty Connell. Is it Connell or Connell? I've been calling you Marty and Tony, so I feel like an idiot.